Hello, and welcome to the online material for Music Hum. I'm Brad Garton. This is going to be it's the second video for our Thursday, April 9th class. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the guy who's kind of like, I wouldn't say the opposite, but the other side of the coin in the evolution of modernism, 20th century, is Arnold Schoenberg, other side from Stravinsky, who we just talked about. Okay, and Schoenberg was born in Vienna. He was born in 1874 and lived until 1951. Right, so he had a pretty good life. His dad was a shopkeeper and his mother was a piano teacher, so she kind of like introduced him to music and got him involved in good musical things. And he was pretty talented. He published a book he was very much a music pedagogue, and he really liked kind of the structure of music and, the theory behind music. Published a book that was called the Harmonielehre, which is, the learning harmony, and became wildly popular. Used quite a bit, and it landed him a job at the Viennese Conservatory. But unfortunately, he was Jewish, and the Nazis were gaining power, and his family did the smart thing, and in 1933 they immigrated, and he got a job at USC and UCLA and taught music there until he finally died and retired and died. But he had a profound effect on music, especially in academia in the 20th century. And I'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, he kind of started out just sort of doing, I wouldn't say normal stuff, but late romantic kind of things. His music is kind of divided into three different parts. Okay, the first part was basically kind of romantic expressionism, the kinds of things that, say, Stravinsky was doing with the Firebird. This was at the tail end of the Romantic era in the wake of Wagner. And this is a piece from that period called Verklärte Nacht, or Transfigured Night. And you'll hear it's quite tonal, but it has that passion and that kind of romantic churning and things like that. But here we go. I'll play a little bit of it. So you can hear the harmonies are a little interesting. But he also has a strong sense of melody, a strong sense of phrasing, and how to put music together. Okay, and I'll run it ahead a little bit and show you, after it gets going a little bit, he's doing things like this. So you can hear he's working within the tonal system, but it's a little twisted. That cadence there, wound up on a weird kind of chord and kept you going. Again, very much informed by what had happened during the Romantic era and the pushing of harmony. And in fact, he pushed it even further in what I guess I would call his second period, where he started to really embrace, like Stravinsky did with The Rite of Spring, atonality, or the idea that, somehow the dissonance was going to be part and parcel of your working of music. And he wrote probably his most well-known work is this piece called Pierrot Lunaire, which is the story of a Pierrot-like character who stares at the full moon and has kind of all these bizarre kind of hallucinations and things like that. And I'm just going to play you a little bit from the first. It was a bunch of poems by Alfred Jarry. This is the first one called Mondestrunken, or drunk on the moon. And I'll bring up the words so you can see part of it. But here we go. This is Pierrot Lunaire by Arnold Schoenberg.
Den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt, gießt nachts der Mond in Wogen nieder. Und eine Sprengflut überschwemmt den stillen Horizont.
So you can hear this is not the tonal system at all. It's very atonal. And he's also doing something with a voice that he called Sprechstimme, or speaking play, where he didn't really notate it exactly, but notated the trajectories of the text.
Den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt, gießt nachts der Mond in Wogen nieder. Der Dichter, den die Andacht träumt, berauscht sich von dem heiligen.
So you can hear it has a very, very intriguing sound to it. It sounds very otherworldly, alien, expressionistic. And that's what he was after. But he was not happy with this, okay? Again, this is the theorist in him coming out. He felt that, just embracing free atonality left his music adrift. He wanted something solid to put his music on. He wanted a theory that could encompass the kinds of dissonances that he felt were important for his music. Something to replace, essentially, the tonal system that had been, used for centuries by composers. And this is probably his greatest contribution to the evolution of music, especially in the 20th century, was he came up with a system that's called 12-tone composition, or kind of more appropriately, serialism. Well, what is it? It's a really intriguing approach. He said he wanted to emancipate dissonance. And he felt by doing this is almost like political in the way he designed it. He said every note in the chromatic scale should have an equal footing. And any combination that the composer felt was worthwhile should be encompassed by this 12-tone or serialist system. And what he did was he said, well, to make sure that happens, I will set it up so that you have to use, this is kind of very, very crass formulation of it, you have to use every note of the 12-tone scale before you can start over again. And I've got a little application here that shows you how that works, okay? So basically, you start out and you have a melody, and this melody is going to be based on these 12 notes. Here's one. And you can't repeat any of the notes until you've played all 12 of them. Now, in practice, that's not quite how it was used. Composers began to fragment this and divide it up. And one of the first things that they would do was also play one set against the other, so you could do something like this. And you can get all kinds of very intriguing sort of combinations out of it. Very dissonant, no tonal center at all. There's no resolution. There's no cadences per se. It's all based on this idea that you're using the entire chromatic scale. It's all at your disposal. And like I said, this had a profound influence, kind of counter to sort of the intuitiveness of Stravinsky. And we're going to talk about Bartók in the next video here. But let me play you an example. And you're thinking, this sounds crazy, Brad. I'll play you an example of a piano piece he did. This is towards the end of his life. His Klavierstück, Opus 33. He numbered his pieces. And you'll get a sense of how it sounds. And it's not quite as, what's the word? It's not quite as mathematical. It's a very passionate piece because that's what kind of writer he was. So here we go. This is his piano piece, excuse me. So you can hear the dissonance and the harmonies are just kind of floating along, and just kind of, winding through these strange worlds of new chords. There you're probably hearing, you're going, oh, but Brad, you said you couldn't repeat the notes. And obviously notes are being repeated. Again, it's more of a guiding principle that you use this whole series of notes, before you could really kind of go back. And it was a way of being sure that you were getting everything out of the chromatic scale that you could possibly get. So again, he had a lot of influence, and a lot of his influence came from the fact that he was a gifted pedagogue. And he had two students that studied with him in Vienna, who became quite well known in their own right. One was a student named Anton Berg. Okay, and Berg lived from 1885 to 1935. Again, Viennese. Died a little bit early. He came from a pretty good family, but unfortunately he had an insect bite, and he died of blood poisoning from this insect bite. But Berg did some pretty interesting work with Schoenberg's 12-tone system. And one of the things he's most known for is a couple of operas that he wrote. One called Lulu and one called Wozzeck, based on some very passionate kind of German plays. And I won't go through the whole 9 yards of what these operas are about. You can look them up online and, read about them. They're really intense experiences because, again, they have this dissonance through them, and the subject matter is prostitution and death and murder. This is the ultimate scene from Wozzeck, where basically Wozzeck's wife/girlfriend Marie is being murdered by Wozzeck at the very end, and you'll hear what happens. Okay, so you can hear he's actually very organic in his use of this 12-tone system, and it sounds kind of almost strangely tonal in a way. But get to the climax of the piece, and you'll start hearing really kind of come out. So you can hear the 12-tone dissonance is just really well suited for conveying the passion and the horror of that murder scene, and this is dissonance kind of does that, but again, Berg was also quite a composer. He wrote a violin concerto that actually shows how you can take this 12-tone system and make it sound quite beautiful too. This is his violin concerto from the first movement, and I'll play a bit of it, and just listen. Again, this is using that 12-tone emancipation of dissonance system, but it has a really beautiful quality to it. So it almost sounds like a late romantic piece, but it's strict serialism. He chose his initial sequence of notes very judiciously to create this, very beautiful unfolding of this violin concerto. Okay, now one more student. The other famous student that Schoenberg had was Anton Webern. He lived from 1883 to 1945, and you might think he was also born in Vienna. You might think that he was a victim of Nazi atrocities, but he wasn't. He wasn't Jewish. Berg and Webern both were not Jewish, so they were able to survive in Vienna during the Anschluss. But their work was considered degenerate. Their music was degenerate. So they kind of laid low. And Webern actually went to Salzburg and lived there. And unfortunately, he went out one night and was having a smoke out of his cigar on his porch and was unfortunately killed by a stray bullet that came from somewhere. And too bad. His father was a civil servant. His mother was, like Schoenberg's, a pianist and a singer. And he did some really amazing work with this serial system. And in fact, he took the serial idea and also extended it to a thing he called Klangfarben Melodien, which basically translate into sound melodies. And he explored different ways of playing instruments, different ways of articulating notes on instruments to get different timbres. And he would actually serialize the timbres along with the notes so that you had different series going in different kind of domains. And they all intersected to produce his music. And his music has a real otherworldly quality as a result of it. This is I'm going to play the first of his 6 bagatelles. This is for string quartet. And this is not like your string quartet music that you've heard before. I'll play the very first one here. That's it. Yeah. He's what he's doing is he's pointing towards something that's going to be picked up later on called total serialism, where you take all the aspects of your music. Like I said, in this case, the timbre. You look at the rhythms. You look at the durations. You look at the articulations. The louds and softs. And you make series out of all these, and you work out the mathematics so that they produce these just incredibly weird pieces of music. I really like Webern stuff, and part of the reason I like it is they're really short. That was only 30 seconds long. Here's the second one of the bagatelles. Yeah, another gem of a piece. It's really funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's kind of interesting when you watch a string quartet playing this. It looks like these guys are working on operating some weird apparatus, because they're all over their instruments to produce these different articulations. This is truly the beginning of the avant-garde here too. This is music that people had not experienced before. And that's going to become a real thread that we're going to pursue as we go through the rest of the 20th century.